Today, we're continuing our discussion of Hermetic principles with the principle of polarity. This principle states everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. What does this saying mean, and what does this idea imply? Let's find out. Matt, where did you go? We have a show to do on polarity.
Sorry, my virtual evil twin showed up today and I'm having to deal with him.
Maybe you should try reversing the polarity of the neutron flow, but I guess confronting your opposite is appropriate since the principle of polarity is supposed to challenge the conventional perception of opposites as distinct and irreconcilable.
Reversing the flow worked. I suppose we can now get along well enough for this video. I guess you want me to give our viewers an overview of the principle.
Okay, Matt, go ahead and get us started.
The principle of polarity asserts that everything in the universe possesses a dual nature, with opposing yet interconnected poles. This duality is not limited to physical objects, but extends to emotions, thoughts, and even abstract concepts. For instance, light and dark, hot and cold, love and hate are all examples of polarity in action. The key insight is that these seemingly opposing forces are not separate entities, but rather varying degrees along a spectrum.
So what they're saying is that without darkness, we would not be able to perceive light, and vice versa. Similarly, heat and cold, love and fear, joy and sorrow, all represent points along a continuum where one extreme defines and gives meaning to the other. It seems to have a lot in common with various dualist philosophies and theologies, such as Manichaeism and the yin and yang concept found in Eastern philosophy.
In some ways, although Manichaeism and related Middle Eastern religious movements saw concepts like good and evil as fundamentally separate and in constant conflict, while Hermetic polarity sees them as varying degrees along a continuous spectrum. They have a closer relationship with Chinese Taoist cosmology and philosophy, since these two ideas are quite similar in many aspects, but different in their cultural context.
I've read that some historians speculate that some Greek Gnostic ideas and Chinese Taoist ideas traveled the Silk Road the same way goods did. Then these ideas intermixed with each other.
Or others will tell you that it's simply both these ancient cultures finding the universal truths, the ones that they don't want common folks to know about.
Well, that is one of the attractions of Hermetic philosophy, that it espouses the power of hidden knowledge. So, what practical power do proponents see this polarity principle providing practitioners?
They'll explain that by recognizing that these opposites are not static, but rather fluid across a spectrum. One can shift their perspective on how they engage with the world. They believe that the key to personal growth and transformation lies in embracing the inherent duality of existence. Rather than resisting or rejecting the negative aspects of one's life, they encourage people to acknowledge these aspects as integral parts of the whole. By accepting both the light and the shadow within oneself, they think it will allow them to find improvement physically, mentally, and spiritually, and ultimately reaching transcendence.
They're implying that this perspective shift would make a person more capable of consciously choosing how they interact with the world?
Yes, it's felt that one can learn how to reframe perception and thus focus on the positive aspects of this situation. When faced with challenges or adversity, this shift in focus can lead to a more optimistic outlook, increased resilience, and a greater sense of agency over one's life. This means that negative emotions like fear or anger can be transmuted into their positive counterparts, such as courage and compassion. Similarly, undesirable circumstances can be transformed into opportunities for growth and learning.
Okay, so we're back to the transformation idea that permeates Hermetic philosophy. It seems like this is another idea that's been adopted by a lot of modern self-help gurus. I guess the difference is that Hermeticism is expressed in a more esoteric, mystical symbolism, while modern self-help philosophies try to use more accessible, straightforward approaches with a focus on practical application.
I do think you humans love a good dose of mysticism.
And that's true. Almost everybody likes a good mystery. So does Hermeticism recognize any limits to shifting polarity?
Yes, such transmutation using polarity has to be of the same class. For example, hot and cold temperatures are points along a pole, part of the same class. However, hot and loudness or cold and height are not of the same class and therefore can't be transmuted.
That makes sense, although I suppose there are some cases where the lines get blurred to some degree, or that an object can have many different attributes. How does Hermeticism address this?
While the basic concept of polarity involves two opposing poles, it's important to recognize that objects and phenomena can have multiple dimensions of polarity. For example, a piece of art can be both beautiful and unsettling, evoking different spectrums of emotion in different viewers. Also, in complex systems like humans, there might be a hierarchy of polarities, with some being more dominant or fundamental than others. For instance, the polarity of life and death might be considered more fundamental than the polarity of happiness and sadness in a living being. Sometimes the different polarities within a system are not isolated but interconnected and influence each other. A change in one polarity can affect other polarities. For example, turning up the volume of an amplifier will cause it to heat up. There's also the concept of dynamic equilibrium, where in a system with multiple polarities, one will find a balance across all dimensions, recognizing that each polarity has its place and function.
To circle back around to the practical aspects of this principle, it seems that the real value here is in shifting one's perspective to reframe challenges as opportunities, setbacks as stepping stones, and adversity as a catalyst for growth.
Some even take it further, believing that by building one's skill at reversing polarity that they can access the power of mental induction to influence and control others.
Sounds like we're talking about using magic again, Matt.
Maybe, but they'll tell you that really what they're talking about is influencing someone to shift their perspective. For example, a psychologist can help a patient transmute a mental trauma into empowerment, giving their patient a more positive outlook. And there's the negative pole where various mind control techniques have been used by certain intelligence agencies to try to induce bad behaviors.
So even the principle of polarity has poles, I suppose. To get back to the positive side, I think that one of the most empowering aspects of this principle is the potential for personal growth. Since, according to this principle, polarities exist along a spectrum, it becomes possible to shift negative emotions to their positive counterparts. Similarly, undesirable circumstances can be transformed into opportunities for growth and learning. Basically, we should keep in mind that we aren't victims of our circumstances, but active participants in shaping our own reality. Do you think the dualism of the principle of polarity is a valid concept, or an unrealistic or overgeneralized way to look at the world? Can utilizing this principle make you captain of your ship of life? Or are you fated to always be the cabin boy? Let us know your thoughts on the principle of polarity in the comments. And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next episode on the Hermetic principle of rhythm.